Welcome to 558 Parkside Tech, where we talk about tech's past, present, and future. I'm your tech plug, Mike. Today I'm talking to three distinct groups: the person trying to get into tech, the person who's been in tech greater than 10 or 15 years, and also the developer or engineer who's been in tech less than 10 years. And I want all of them to ask this question: will the future you be proud or happy with the current you's decision when it comes to tech? All right, you 558ers, future tech creators, let's get into it right after this.
558 Parkside Tech in effect, 558 Parkside Tech in effect, 558 Parkside Tech in effect, Parkside.
So I want to start off by talking to the person who's trying to jump into tech. Now, when you're trying to jump into tech, at first you're going to be lost. Let's just clear that up right now. You're going to be lost. And I always tell anyone who jumps in, no matter what happens, never measure yourself against anybody else. If you decide to do it, and of course you call your friend and you say, yo, let's learn how to do tech, man, that's where the money is. Of course, everybody says that, not thinking about all the hard work. Never measure yourself against anybody else. Just know that when you're learning tech, if you know more today than you knew yesterday, and then today you learn something that you didn't know, and then tomorrow you learn something else, that's the key. Just keep on learning, keep on grinding, step by step. Now, the thing that confuses most people, and I get a lot of emails about this, and when I talk to people, I hear basically the same thing. And the thing that I hear is, where do you start? What do I need to get a job? Because as you go out there, there's so many different languages, so many different databases, so many different clouds. Where do you start? I will tell anybody, just pick something from the front end if you want to be a front end developer. Back in the day, we used to call them programmers. The term has changed. So if I use the term interchangeably in this conversation, I'm saying one and the same. So if you're going to be a front end developer, there are certain languages you need to learn. If you follow some of my other videos, I talk about that, but I'll briefly throw it out here. Front end would be like Angular, React, all of it is JS, all of it is JavaScript. They're versions of JavaScript, okay? So that's front end. HTML5, CSS, those are some things people are familiar with hearing. That's front end. So if you want to be a front end developer, there you go. There's also what we call back end. Now let me define in layman's terms what I mean. Front end is like when you go to the ATM machine and there's that screen. That's the front end. That's the first thing you see that's in front of you. That's front end. Same thing with your phone, front end. Those are front end screens, so to speak, for lack of a better term. Back end is anything you can't see that's doing some calculation or doing something for you can't see. And those languages are the C#, the Javas, the Pythons, and all those languages are object-oriented languages, or OOP. Sometimes you hear people go oops instead of saying the whole term of object-oriented programming. Becomes a mouthful. So determine which one you want to be, a front-end or back-end developer. So that's one. Now you also have to learn a little bit about databases. Now you don't have to start off right off doing databases. You just have to maybe get your arm around the language that you want to learn and play around with that, and you'll write to console. You'll know what I mean once you start. You'll be writing to console, not to a database, not reading from a database or anything like that, all right? That way you can just learn the syntax of the language that you decided to learn, okay? Once you get your arm around the language, so that's step one, right? Then you want to learn about connecting to a database, because the whole purpose of writing code is to do something with a database, store data. Everything about tech is data. So learn about a database, whether it be the Microsoft database, the Oracle database. There's so many Postgres, there's so many databases out there. Pick one and connect to it from your code. It's going to take some time before you do that, because you still have to understand the language first before you connect. Because once you start connecting to the database, you're going to have to spend some time and learn about database, learn about SQL. And that's a separate, whole nother animal unto itself. Now that you've got one, you picked a language. Two, you learned how to connect to a database. Now you need to put this code somewhere. Maybe you want to share it with somebody. Or maybe you want to write some code and one day you think you're going to look for a job and you're going to say, hey, look, this is the stuff that I wrote. So you're going to have to learn about something called SCM, Source Control Management. What do I mean? I mean, you're going to have to figure out where you could put your code. And some of the things that are available out there are free. And it's called Git, G-I-T. Or GitLab or GitHub. All of them have Git in them, for lack of a better way of explaining it. So you grab yourself GitLab or GitHub, learn how to connect to it. They call them repositories. Learn how to connect to it and learn how to put your code there so that you can save your code there, as well as you make changes, it'll keep up with a history of all your changes. All right. So now we've got 1, you had to learn a language. You picked front end or back end. That's what you picked, front end or back end first. 2, you learned about databases. 3, you have to store your code. Now here's 4. Now 4 is tricky if you're new to tech. But the next thing you're going to have to do is learn a little bit about the cloud, because everybody's putting their code in the cloud. But initially, you can just store it on your personal computer as you're writing it, or if you use Git, you just store it on your computer. But you're going to have to learn a little bit about the cloud. Now, I'm not going to go any further than that for a beginner, because that right there is a major undertaking, those 4 things. So let me rehash it one more time in case you fell asleep at any point of this or I lost you. 1, determine if you're going to do front end or back end. 2, determine about databases. Figure out which database you want to connect to. 3, find a place to store your code. Learn a little bit about Git, whether you use GitLab or GitHub. What was 4? I almost forgot what 4 was. And 4 was learn a little bit about the cloud. I almost lost myself on that one. All right. So those are the steps if you're just starting. Now the thing I will say to you that's important is you must have discipline. There's a saying, you are what you repeatedly do. So if you're full of boo-boo and you say you're going to do it, and one day goes by and 2 days go by and you wake up and 3 months have gone by, it's because you have bad habits and you have no discipline. It's important with tech that you find some discipline. Find a time where you're not sleepy. Sometimes if you have a full-time job or you have 2 jobs, which most people do, who aren't making a lot of money but have a lot of bills to pay, you're going to be sleepy. It's hard to learn when you're sleeping. So try to find a time or take a nap, wake up, and maybe do an hour of tech. The other thing I will say is somewhere find a mentor. I've never used that term, and I learned that term about a few years ago. We used to call it get some help. So I'm going to try to use the big boy word, get a mentor. Find someone that already knows tech so that when you get lost or when you're doing something, you need an explanation as to why it's done that way. You'll have someone that you can talk to. So that's what I got for the new person walking into tech. Those are the steps I think you should take. And if you do that, you'll put yourself in a position to find a job at some point. Everybody learns differently at a different pace. Some people pick up code. Some people are better with the database. Some people are better with cloud. Some people just pick up things differently. So don't hurt yourself and don't discourage yourself if you're going through something and you're having problems. All right? Just push yourself through it. Remember, have discipline. So that's all I can say. I think that's all I want to share when it comes to people jumping into tech for the first time. All right? Now let's move on to the next group. Let me talk about the developer or the programmer that's been around for quite some time. That guy that's coming from the mainframe. What does he do? What is his career path in tech today? You see, that developer, for those that are listening that don't know who this developer is, this is a developer that was around maybe in the 80s or 90s or early 2000s who learned DOS JCL and OS JCL and IMS database. They also knew about DB2 and CICS. Well, those things are still hanging around and they're not going anywhere. What does that developer do? He's probably in his 50s, possibly late 40s, some in their 60s. Not old enough to retire, but yet still in tech. And what he sees when he goes to the office, he sees a bunch of young guys walking around, walking real fast, thinking they're going to save the world. Those are the new guys who know object-oriented programming, who are doing things in the cloud. And he looks at them and he shakes his head because they're still excited and he's semi-worn out, to say the least. What does he do? He went from waterfall methodology to now there's agile methodology, where people are meeting every morning and having what they call sprints or scrums. What does he do? And now everybody's moving to DevOps. You see, the IBM mainframe has evolved as well. IBM has a cloud. IBM now has DevOps. IBM now has a thing called IDZ, which is kind of a front-end emulator that looks like ISPF. For those who are mainframe guys, you know what I'm talking about. It looks like ISPF without you going to a green screen of death. You're actually going to be on your PC connecting to the mainframe. So what does that person do? Do they try to learn object-oriented programming? Well, that's too big of a paradigm shift for many. And many of these programmers have families, they're a little older, they don't want to spend their nights trying to learn object-oriented programming. So either you can try to wait out the clock and hope that your company doesn't do anything too drastic and push you out or lay you off, or you try to learn a little tech. So let me help you with what I think you should start off with. I think you should at least start off with understanding the cloud. I think that is in first and maybe the easiest place to go. Is just get familiar with the cloud and some of the terminology on the cloud, because that'll lend you into DevOps. Because when we talk about IDZ now, that everybody's starting to use, that is a step toward DevOps. And DevOps is a two-word. It's two words kind of thrown together. It's development and operations together. Okay. So when you have IDZ that's connected to the mainframe, you're going through the web to actually do that. So there's not a straight connection to the mainframe like you used to do with that green screen. So learn a little bit about the cloud. Now, if you feel like you're going to be around a little bit longer in your late 40s, try to pick up an object-oriented programming class. But now here's the key. Try to find someone that used to do COBOL so that when you get stuck, they can say it's like this. For example, with C#, there's a thing called enums. They'll say, okay, you see these enums. You're like, what's an enum? They're going to say it's like your 88 levels in COBOL. You need someone that can give you a comparison, because everything you did in COBOL, that's what's being done in object-oriented programming. There's a thing that you always will hear someone say who only knows object-oriented programming. They will say the reason why we're doing object-oriented programming is because COBOL is old, and also they'll say that because object-oriented programming does reusable, you can reuse your objects. Well, here's the truth. You did the same exact thing in COBOL. You reused the read paragraph. You didn't write a new read paragraph. So those who say that are usually the ones on the object-oriented programming side who know nothing about COBOL. So really don't know what they're talking about. So it's not something you can't do. You can do it, but I think the best way to do it is find someone who knows COBOL so that he can say to you that, okay, this is like this and that's like this. And when you write a paragraph, you've got all your code in there, your move statements or write statements, but all your data is sitting in your data division or in your work and storage division. Well, in object-oriented programming, everything's thrown together within the paragraph. So you need someone to explain that to you. Because if you're going to hang around for another 10 years, if your company doesn't, maybe your company will get off the mainframe altogether or lay people off and switch everything to .NET. Most big organizations can't do that. There's too many millions of lines on the mainframe, millions and millions of lines of code. No one's rewriting all that code. Plus, the IBM machine is too much of a workhorse for people to try to throw them all on servers. And with IBM moving to the cloud and making great strides to even convert COBOL and make it an object-oriented language, I think that's where it's going to head. You're still going to have to get your arms around it. So start slow. Don't wait till you hear, oh, about to switch over. If you don't learn, you got to go. At one company I was with, that's what they did. They threw everybody in a class to learn object-oriented programming, and of course, half the programmers with gray hair had trouble because it was such a paradigm shift for them to think in such a different way. And yes, it was DB2 that they knew, which was SQL, and they thought that if they went from SQL in DB2 to Microsoft SQL, it'd be the same. It's not the same. In fact, Microsoft SQL calls itself T-SQL or transactional SQL, and it's a little bit more powerful than what you do in DB2. So what am I saying to the older developer who's coming from the mainframe? I'm saying just pick up cloud first, and that'll kind of ease you into DevOps, all right? And then if you know you're going to be around longer than 10 years because you're not going to be able to retire, or if you're older and you don't have enough money to retire and you're still in the workforce, slowly learn it, but try to find someone that can explain it from where you're at. And where you're at is procedural, where you're at is DB2. There's really no comparisons to CICS, I'm sorry to say. There's no comparison to the front end in CICS. That you might be on your own. So I can't even recommend a COBOL programmer who knows CICS to try to start doing front end HTML, CSS, or anything like that. I think that'll be a major undertaking, okay? That'll break your spirit, have you fall out, okay? So that's what I'll say about that. But so I'm saying 1, 2, and 3. I'm basically saying learn the cloud. And if you're going to be around longer than that, if you're late 40s or 50 and you still got a number of years left, learn an object-oriented language.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here.
So now you're going to say to me, and if you're thinking about what I'm saying, you're going to say, hey, in COBOL, I'm at the top rung of my salary in my company. Why would I go learn a language where then I'll become a a fresher or someone brand new, and then I have to start all over and my pay will change. I'm not saying that you quit your job and start learning and start writing object-oriented programming. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when someone is talking about it, you understand what they're saying. Because all you've thought about, if you're a COBOL developer, all you thought about was migrating your code from your PDS up to integration to qual, if you have qual, or to prod. You never thought about distributed processing. And when you start getting into .NET or Java, it's all distributed processing. So it's a lot of other things in connectivity and IP addresses and network ports and things you're going to have to understand. You have to understand that an IP address is octets. Those are the different numbers that you see. There's so many things you're going to have to learn that isn't necessarily coding. It's just understanding distributed processing. So I will say that to all the developers that are coming from the main. Slowly start getting into it. Don't wait until you find out there's layoffs or you find out that the company wants you to come back into the office and you decide, well, I think I got enough money, I can hang in there. Maybe I can coast to retirement. No, just learn something new. Because to me, understanding both platforms, COBOL was a little harder. I hate to say that because someone object-oriented programming will say, no, it's not. But COBOL is a little bit harder because you had to write every single line of code. In object-oriented programming, there are many classes that are pre-written, some 3,000 or 4,000 pre-written classes that most of the developers know that they can grab and take from. Plus, there's so much code out there in GitHub. If you listen to my previous thing on beginners, there's GitHub that you can go out there and grab code that does certain things and then you modify it for yourself. You could only do that in the past with an in-house code. So if someone at your job created a COBOL program that you can mirror, that's what you did. But here you can go out to the whole world and grab something that someone's done that's working. So that's my take on those that are coming from the mainframe, that have been in the business for quite some time, who aren't quite old enough to retire, but who don't want to just coast, because coasting is dangerous, as you know. So slowly grasp it. Find someone who came from maybe COBOL, who understands OSJCL, who understands the things that you understand so they can explain it to you. And whatever you do, don't shut your brain off. You see, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you're a dancer. There are new dances out. I don't care if you're a seamstress. Well, there's new designs and new patterns. In other words, tech isn't the only thing that changes. Everything changes. So those are like, well, if I'm in tech, it changes so often. Yeah, everything changes. Music changes. Everybody says that current music is garbage. If you've been around long enough, I think it is too, but that's another story. But I'm just saying everything changes, so it's only logical that tech changes too. And these changes are, I don't want to say it's for the better or for the worse, it's just change. And here's the thing, you're only doing 4 things: create, read, update, delete. That's all object-oriented programming is doing. It's the same thing we did on the mainframe. And what makes one company different from the other is the edits, and maybe their processes, or how they process, or their actual design. But at the end of the day, they're still dealing with data. So that's my take. I didn't mean it takes so long in explaining it, but that's my take on what a person who's coming from the mainframe, who's still around, who doesn't want to coast, who wants to keep growing and keep learning. Because you want to be in control of your destiny. You don't want your company to control your destiny. And when you get out there in the job market, should you be at a company a long time, you realize that everybody has some form of object-oriented programming. Everybody's in the cloud. Everybody's doing something across the web. And the reason why they are is because everybody wants to be on your phone. They want direct contact to their customers, and you can't do that with CICS. You can't do that with the mainframe, but you can do it. So you see a lot of older companies will have the mainframe that'll do all the heavy lifting, and then they'll shift the data over either JSON or XML to the front end. And then the guys in the company who are walking around all fast and spry and happy to be there while you're dragging, they're the ones that capture that data from the mainframe and they display it on a phone via an API. So that's the world that we're in. So go ahead and jump in, just jump in. All right. So that's all I got for that group. Now let me move on to the next group. Now for the next group, I want to talk to the developers that have been around maybe a shorter period of time, maybe 5 years, 6 years, or anything less than 10 years, who kind of came in, maybe they got a certification, or they came in, they took a class, or they're in a university or whatever, and now they're doing something. Maybe they're doing front end, or they're doing back end, maybe they're doing security, maybe they're doing networking, but they're doing something in tech and being very productive. The thing I will say to those people is this: tech owes you nothing. Your company owes you nothing, and you can't wait for your company company to switch gears. So whatever you're doing that you've semi-mastered, it's time to learn something new, because tech is forever evolving. So what I find is that when people are about to get laid off because the project is no good, or they started a new project and then they found out that there's no customer out there that's willing to buy it, so they have to lay people off. I think recently Tesla just laid off a bunch of people. So you must keep your eye on how tech is moving. And with AI, it's kind of displacing a lot of jobs. I've heard a lot of word salad about how it's supposed to help you. In my personal opinion, yeah, it's going to help you. It's going to help you not have a job. That's how I look at it. But I think it will be some assistance to you. But again, it'll probably do away with some of the people that were actually helping you at times. So you have to keep evolving in tech. That's all I can tell you. You've gone through the process once of learning one thing or two things. So continue to learn more things. And stop waiting around for your company to say go learn it. Stop waiting around to hear the warning signs. Just know that each company is doing one thing for sure. That is, they want to do more with less. Let me say that again. They want to do more with less. And the most expensive things to a company, the most expensive thing, is people. So the less people we have, the more profit we have. You know, most companies who have stock, if you ever in-house or in the office, their homepage for the company is usually showing their stock price, because that's what's important to them. They will lay off, do whatever they got to do, even new projects. The whole goal is to make more money. That's the world we live in now. There used to be, and I don't want to date myself, but there used to be a department within a company that was development for the associates in the company. Those days are gone. Some companies just subscribe you to a website like Pluralsight or Cloud Guru or some website and say go learn there. Or some companies even say you need to get this certification or get that certification. You're on your own. So that's the world in which we live in. So we have to adapt to that world. Because again, if the most expensive thing is the employee, then that employee has to make themselves valuable. And how you make yourself valuable is continue to learn. When you get a new job after 90 days, now that you're a full-time fledged employee after 90 days, let's say about the 6-month mark, when you finally start feeling comfortable with what you're doing at the new company, it's time to go learn something new. And now if you start then, you can learn at your own pace. Maybe it's 1 hour a week, picking up and looking at where tech is headed. There are some people that are in tech, and I wonder why they're in tech. I think maybe they're in tech because it was a good way to get out of the country, or maybe they were in tech because they thought they could make a lot of money. Maybe there's no love for tech. But whether you love tech or don't love tech, because it's evolving, you must continue to learn something new. And that's what I got for the people who are, as far as career path, that's what I have for people who are already in tech, who are doing their thing in tech, going to work every single day or logging in from home. Continue to learn something new. Figure out where tech is. Subscribe to articles, whether it be the Code magazine, or whether it be there's so many magazines out there, SD Times, just different magazines, so that you can read and see where tech is headed, so that you can kind of catch it before it turns so fast that what you're doing they're not doing anymore. All right, so that's all I got for that group. I don't have much for them because they're already up and at it, but still they have to remember that you have to continue to learn tech. And remember, the company owes you nothing. Tech owes you nothing. All right? That's all I got. Thank you for joining me today. And if this material was a benefit to you, please hit the like button and subscribe. Also, I've been getting emails about a Patreon page. I do not have one. But if you'd like to donate to the cause, you can go to 558parksideTech.com and just hit the donate button. Anything from $5 to $10 would be great. I want to leave you with a question. The question is, if the cost of learning tech is expensive in time or in money or just in energy, imagine what the cost would be if you do not learn tech. That's all I got. Peace.
Yeah, 558 Parkside Tech in effect, 558 Parkside Tech in effect, tap in the future. Let me introduce you. 558 Parkside Tech, about to school ya. 558 Parkside Tech in effect, 558 Parkside Tech in effect, 558 Parkside Tech in effect, Parkside.